The first thing when you spoke of that came to mind is that like everyone is going to have a different definition of how they feel safe. And I think in my position, it's trying to find what that is in every single individual that I talk to. Like, how can I create safety for this person versus like someone else? And so some of that's just relatability and connecting. You mentioned like sports and travel and some of those things. And so me personally use like a very rapport based system to kind of build a really strong foundation relationship, let everyone know that like I do like care about them and like love them and want to like learn more. And so a lot of times I put myself in the learner space and allow the person I'm seeing to like educate me on like some of their interests, what's going on with them. And it's very empowering for them. And I think it also allows them to be in a place where they feel comfortable, like I'm allowing them to share about themselves and I'm listening. And so I think it then cultivates a space where they can feel like safe with like things that maybe aren't easy to talk about.
Hello, beautiful beings. I'm really excited to sit down with Trey Bell, who is a licensed social worker, a holistic health coach, and personal trainer who uses his background in travel, sports, nature, and mindfulness to support his clients. And I'm really excited to sit down with you, pick your brain a little bit, and really delve deep into the retreats. You hold male-oriented retreats, is that correct?
Yeah, moving in that direction. Most of the work I'm doing right now is like psychotherapy, predominantly with men. But we're on this upward trajectory towards, serving men in a retreat space, both individually and through groups too.
Yeah, this was something that really excited me in our conversation and in sharing it with viewers, is because we don't really hear a lot about safe containers for men being held specifically for men. And there's a lot of dialogue in the community and pushback and even some resentment that you tend to see online of women who are doing the inner work towards men in not so much doing the inner work. And I really think that this conversation with you is going to demystify that a little bit, is going to really support us in holding more compassion for the experience of men in doing the inner work, and just have a more insightful understanding as to like, how do we support men in doing the inner work?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I'm really excited to talk about this. I've been working as a outpatient psychotherapist since 2011. And I started working with kids and then kind of like moved into like teenage boys. And now I'm doing work with mostly like upper end of adolescence into, I think my oldest client's like 60 right now. And I would say about 85 to 90% of the clients that I see right now are all males, and most of them coming in on their own accord, really wanting to work on things that, they've been conditioned into via their past and history and background. So.
I really love this. And I love this because I didn't know that you were working with young boys. And I love this because my meditation practices and a lot of my work has been geared in trying to move it into the school systems to support children in mindfulness, and working with parents in terms of conscious parenting to support children in moving into a more vulnerable and mindful mindset. And my belief system is that if we teach children about regulating one's nervous system, even how to observe when another child's nervous system has become disrupted, in co-regulating through supporting, and then also in reading and understanding energy, that we can even get to the point of recognizing the potential school shooting or a child who is feeling division or very separate, and that children can rally together to support rather than further ostracise that particular child.
Yeah, I mean, I love everything you're saying. It's so important. And especially, from the male side of the perspective, I think we're coming into this new era where men are starting to be allowed, it feels like, from society to like feel a little bit more and be a little more raw and vulnerable. But we're just like, feel like just on the edge of that. And, being able to, like you said, like acknowledge others in the co-regulation space, I think is really important. And it's something where it's just like, oh, it's been like, that's just that person being that person in the past. And if we kind of like get a little more into like, well, maybe like, it's not just that person. Maybe there's something going on in their life that we really need to like dig into and support. And, creating safe spaces to allow the people that are, really feeling raw and vulnerable and understanding that anger or rage or hate, just comes from a place of fear and sadness, and really trying to create a safe space for these guys to be able to open up and feel a little bit more, feel where it's really coming from. I mean, you speak of the school shootings space, and that's just like it makes me feel right now, just like thinking about what that is and how, as a society, we could be so much more preventative of that and be so much more supportive of people.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I really think that what we see in school systems is a reflection of our culture and our society. And when we see children in collectives, when we watch them and observe them, we can see how they're mirroring their environments onto one another without even consciously understanding that that's what they're doing. And all you have to do is really observe a collective of children in a school system to really witness like what the lack of awareness that we have here in within society, within our culture, and really use that as a flashlight into recognizing where it is that we need to put more attention to create a safer environment. And you mentioned safe space, or a safe, we also use the term safe container. For those who are kind of new to this work, can you elaborate a little bit more on what a safe container or safe space is and how we can hold that for another?
Sure, I'll try my best. It's, that's a big task, but it, the first thing when you spoke of that came to mind is that like everyone is going to have a different definition of how they feel safe. And I think, in my position, it's trying to find what that is in every single individual that I talk to. Like, how can I create safety for this person, versus like someone else? And so some of that's like just relatability and, connecting, you mentioned like sports and travel and some of those things. And so, me personally, I use like a very rapport based, system to kind of build a really strong foundation relationship. Let everyone know that like I do like care about them and like love them, and want to like learn more. And so a lot of times I put myself in the learner space and allow the person I'm seeing to like educate me on like some of their interests, what's going on with them. And it's very empowering for them. And I think it also allows them to be in a place where, they feel comfortable, like I'm allowing them to share about themselves and I'm listening. And so I think it then cultivates a space where they can feel like safe with like things that maybe aren't easy to talk about. So that's kind of like, I guess, a little bit of a blanket, but, I think a lot of it comes from the presence of the person, that's holding the space, and making sure that it's not super reactive and, very much like, from a place of care. A- And I think it does matter like how much attention, we're giving to the person, and making sure that, they know that we're here and we're connected, and we're asking questions about them, and not necessarily about the situation or whatever, but just asking questions about who they are, what they are, true being, authenticity. We pull away all the layers of that person, like at the core and at the root. What is it, or who are you?
Mm, beautiful. So yeah, reflect back what I heard. And so what I'm hearing is that a safe space is a space where we're showing another that we value them by wanting to know what their experience is and what they are experiencing, what their reality is for them. And by being able to really be mindful and intentional with them. Eye contact, non-defensiveness. So if they're articulating that maybe they felt hurt by a particular behavior of ours, that there's no reactiveness, which is also defensiveness, and recognizing that just because this person felt these emotions doesn't necessarily mean that that the trigger or the catalyst was real or, is a fault upon ours. But if we can be non-reactive and allow the person to express their emotions and feelings, then we can better understand the source and where it's coming from.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. And, the part that really drew me in that you were talking about is just making sure that we're allowing the people to have the experience that they're having without trying to say, oh, that's the right way or that's the wrong way. They're experiencing life how they experience in it. And, if I guess in my shoes, I think about I have to be direct sometimes and let somebody know kind of what's going on. But I think of the words like calling in rather than calling out, and making sure we do that in a way that they know that that I value how they see something, and that it doesn't have to change. It doesn't have to be different, but it can be. And so we kind of work around that and work with those ideas, thoughts, the narratives that we create in our minds, and kind of you said the word reality, right? And one of my teachers, Tara Brach, says, thoughts are real but not true. And I really love that. Really love that quote, because it feels very real, but a lot of times it's not true what we're thinking and what we're creating.
Absolutely. I love Tara Brach, and I love that you're working with her. And I would like to elaborate on that. The trigger, the emotion, the sensation, what you're feeling is very real, but it doesn't mean that which has triggered you or the person that is standing in front of you is the problem. And so the trigger is really this beautiful flashlight that's being shown and highlighting what's happening within yourself. And I know that when we get triggered, it's instantaneous that we want to point our finger at the other person and say, this person is causing me pain. This person is causing me to feel a certain way. And, again, the catalyst might not be real, but the emotions are. And being able to hold space is being able to recognize that a person is having an emotion. But it also means that the person having the emotion is being able to articulate that emotion and to relay it to the other person, because communication needs to happen in both ways for us to really have a safe space.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the things as you're speaking, that kind of comes up for me is I often have people check in with their body, when they're feeling that, oh, where are you feeling that in your body? And asking them too, what is that part of your body trying to tell you right now? And then also asking that part of your body how, what it needs to be soothed, and, different things like that. And being able to shut your eyes, feel into that part of your body, and really see what's going on and what's coming up for you.
So I hear that you're doing a little IFS work and somatic work with your clients.
Yeah, I am. I'm not highly trained in those, but it is something I'm actually learning in mindfulness meditation teacher school. So.
Ooh, right on. Cool.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Something you said during one of our previous conversations is that you had mentioned that a sedentary lifestyle destroys masculinity. And that was really poignant and really intense for me to hear that. And I'd like to open up the conversation in regards to masculinity, because when we talk about holding space and vulnerability, we're shifting from this old paradigm, this old belief system, and really recognizing how toxic it was to believe that it's not masculine to be vulnerable. It's not masculine to be open or to really look into our authenticity. And I know that you do a lot of work around masculinity. And so sedentary lifestyle destroys masculinity. Can we unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, it actually gives me chills a little bit as you bring that up. From a physiological standpoint in general, just lifting heavy things and putting them back down, promotes more testosterone in our bodies. And so sometimes just that feeling of empowerment that you can get from like lifting something heavy and putting it back down, or kind of like tapping into something high intensity that makes your body feel a little exhausted. It's funny you bring that up. I'm very sore today because I played this whole weekend in like a slow pitch softball tournament, and like, my body's kind of like tired and sore. And in those ways, sometimes in my mind, I'm like, oh, this is really good for me to have these feelings, because I know that I worked really hard this weekend. Yeah, the first thing that comes to my mind is like, and it gives me a little bit of permission to have a little bit of rest today. But also there's a sensation of empowerment, I feel like, that comes from, just doing things that make you feel strong, like I said, lifting something heavy, putting it back down, whatever, doing a bunch of push-ups, whatever, like kind of working your body to a state of exhaustion that, that I just feel like is really important for the body.
I love that you say that. And it resonates with me because I am at my mother's and I'm helping my mother do a lot of like landscaping. And there's even some projects like rebuilding the walls of a shed and repairing this kind of leaky roof. So getting up on the roof and doing some like tile repair work. And, she has me doing this. And I know that when I'm doing these types of tasks that are usually tasks done by the masculine, or require a certain level of strength and strategy, and also there's a learning curve for me. I know as I'm moving into this in this very kind of analytical way, I feel like I'm embracing my masculine. Like, I feel like I'm in touch with that masculine aspect of myself. And then I'm sore the next day. And it's not this like complaint. It's this recognition of like, my body can support me. My body can handle these challenges. And then it's a great deal of gratitude that I have for my body, that it allows me to do these things in this way. But in a way, I feel like I'm honoring the masculinity within me when I'm doing these types of tasks.
Yeah, and that gave me chills too, because I think it's really important that both men identifying people and women, female identifying people. I think it's important for us to embrace sides of the spectrum, to feel into the masculine as a woman identifying person, and also the same with a man that wants to kind of feel into. We need to feel more into emotions and like some more creative natures and different things that aren't necessarily, society hasn't like really promoted that for a really long time on our end of the spectrum.
Mm. What are some other ways that men and women can support the masculine aspects of self, and those are born male and have a great deal of testosterone and their bodies are reliant on that level of testosterone? How can they improve that? So it's a two-part question.
Obviously, like, strength training, doing things like that, I think is, as important as we were just talking about. But that's not everything too. I believe we're kind of into this a little more because it, I guess the word like toxic masculinity, like has been something that's been in our cultural eye, for a little bit. And that's the overbearing male, that the over masculine, I'm like struggling to find words right now, like kind of like toughed up, chest out, like very much bravado, there's a,
Dominating, domineering, aggressive.
yep.
Yeah.
All of those things.
Yeah.
So there's that on that end of the spectrum. I want to be clear that I don't feel like that's a good thing, for, all the listeners that are out there. But there's a way to kind of have this healthy version of masculinity. And the first thing when you were talking about the word that came to my mind of it is assertiveness. And I think that that's both for men and women, being able to have a calm emotional assertion where we're able to communicate well to anybody really out there that, hey, this makes me feel this type of way. Well, like, what's up? Can we have a conversation about this? Because I don't feel like this is okay for me right now. And that's personally part of my work that I'm leaning into. For me, subjectively, I trend a little bit more to the emotional side, a little bit more to those types of feelings. And I work with my therapist on kind of deconditioning some of my past and to become a little more assertive and to be able to speak my mind a little bit more. And I think that's this balance that, that we're all trying to come into, I think, right now. Yeah, in our world. So
would you say the ability, like the insecurity of being assertiveness, really plays on self-worth and where you're at pertaining to self-worth?
yeah, I mean, I would definitely say that some of it's self-worth. Some of it is a little bit of like, because we've kind of come into this like new era of of like, okay, I think there needed to be a lot of societal changes recently related to toxic masculinity and Black Lives Matter, the feminine coming into a greater stance in our society. And also in some ways, as a man, it's kind of challenging sometimes to know where your lane is right now as far as that's concerned, where, we're trying to figure out like, okay, like we need to soften and be gentle and, be more emotional. But sometimes it feels like there's been a little bit of an overcorrection in that way. And so I think that's kind of the spot that I find myself in sometimes. And a lot of the men that I work with too, that are trying to, come into that more emotional side is like, I don't want to go like too far. And I'm like, get it, definitely, so it's a lot of like playing, and kind of like figuring out like, hey, this has been my pattern for a long time. Whether that's like on that emotional side or whether that's on the more like toxic masculine side, like, hey, this is where I've been at. And then, you talk about the work a lot in the podcast I've listened to before, right? And so the work is like not not finding out what the thing is. Like the easy part, I guess, is like figuring out like, oh, that's the problem. The challenging part is like sticking with that and trying to consistently every day tackle that until you've established a new pattern.
Mm. So I want to reflect back. What I'm hearing is that for men, there's this pendulum swing, right? And we were really leaning high in the extremism of masculinity and the toxic aspects of it. And with that whole John Wayne and Western persona, we've been idealizing this really like aggressive and toxic, kind of demeaning aspects of masculinity, which not only men have been participating in, but women as well. I'm working in New York City in a very hyper and aggressive market. I have seen women supporting and promoting, the concept of toxic masculinity, just as much as men has. So it's a programming that we've adopted. And what I'm hearing is that the work that you're doing with men is supporting men in recognizing this pendulum swing and being able to kind of deprogram so that they can soften into what it means to be and exhibit healthy masculinity. But because there's such a sensitivity in not knowing, we're changing and adapting and we're, really trying to figure out as a society what feels right and where we want to be, because it's no clear path, that some of them will overstep and swing in the opposite direction or are afraid of overstepping. So at the same time, they're also trying to find their authenticity, maintain authenticity, represent authenticity, but also deprogram. And that sounds like one hell of a balance.
Yeah, totally. And it felt like it just like happened in the snap of a finger, just like a few years ago where it was just like, swoop, and we're like, oh, what? And so I think, yeah, the visualization I'm getting in my head is kind of like a slack line or tightrope walker, where we're just kind of like trying to figure out like, oh, how do I take my next step?
Yeah.
Like, where am I going? A little left, little right? Like, I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
And just like, trying to figure it out. So yeah, you nailed that for sure.
Cool. I like this topic and staying on this topic. And I know that you coach and work with women and men. What would you say the major differences are in terms of supporting men and women in doing the inner work? And what are they more receptive to? There's some differences in how they feel comfortable and safe to do the work of deprogramming.
Yeah, great question. But the first thing that kind of comes to my mind is that typically it takes a little longer for the men in my practice to warm up to like actually getting into like talking about some deeper things. And we can almost like when I have a woman as a client, it's just like they come in and they're like, this is what happened, and they just kind of open up emotionally. And so, um, so I feel like for a lot of times I'm warming the guys up, warming them up, building a lot more rapport. Whereas a lot of times, the women come in, they're like, "Shh, this is what's going on." And so, and, just as we've been talking about, I feel like for a lot of times with men, I'm trying to get them to like feel more and see more what's happening like within themselves, and like kind of like being, the word honesty kind of is like coming to mind right now, like just being a little bit more like true. I was, I've been using this term radical honesty lately, where it's just like, you're being so honest with what's coming up for you that, that you have an easy target of like where you're going to go and what you're going to do. And a lot of times I think as, as a man, it's often tough to really be like deeply honest with what's going on, deep in. And then on the other side of the equation with women, they're coming in, they're accessing the emotions really well. And it's not like I'm trying to like get them like out of like feeling or whatever, but more into kind of like that, I guess on the other side, like I'm hearing honesty again, like, but like, feels real, but not true is, I feel like a lot of the work that, I do with women even more, because it's this like, there's so much coming up for them a lot of times where it's like, okay, let's like focus on one thing, one thought, one feeling, one incident, and kind of like, utilize that as like a point to come a little more logical, sometimes a little more rational, tapping into, the left brain. I'll call it the left brain. Even though, the science has recently proven that it's not like, left brain, right brain anymore. You get a little bit of each stuff from either side, but as we know it, that left side. So a little more logical, rational, breathing into that a little bit more and like kind of finding that spot. Whereas, for men, we're typically like focused on more of that emotional, creative side. So, yeah.
Yeah, what I'd like to add to that is that we as women have been groomed, and I use that in the true sense of the word. It's true definition that we've been groomed throughout our lives to live in our emotional space more. It's been more acceptable. It's a way that women communicate and connect with one another. And it's how we relate to one another. So we have far more experience doing this. And men have not. That's the programming. And when you say honesty, and for me, that's so poignant and beautiful, because it's not that this person is intentionally being dishonest. It's that they've never been given the freedom to be honest. And so they've been dishonest with themselves. And if you don't have the capacity to be honest with yourself, how can you be honest with another person? So it's not malicious. It is just that this person has never been allowed in this space. And for those outliers who did want to live in this space, they were, in the old paradigm, were punished for it, shamed for it, and even been called derogatory terms in that world. To be gay is not as acceptable. And so any outliers who did live in their emotional space were definitely punished for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. Yeah. That's actually, I remember a specific time for me in high school. I was really tight with a friend of mine, David. He was my best friend, and I remember both of us like I was like in sports and doing the whole thing, and he was in drama and theater. And I remember at one point, like people like be like, "Oh, you guys are gay together," and I remember that being like very hurtful to me, because like that wasn't how I felt at all.
Yeah.
But just like emotionally in touch, and like just really, cared for my friends, and, always wanted to support them. And so there was like a system for a long time of like, sometimes for me personally, not feeling like I fit in on like a team or something like that, because I would feel a little more emotional than a lot of the other people that were there.
That's heartbreaking for me to hear that. That's so incredibly sad that when a person is leaning into the truth of who they are and the emotional experience that they're having, to be shamed, to be told that that is wrong to feel, and to, oh God, that this just makes my stomach turn. I mean,
Yeah.
feelings and emotions are like some of the most, that's one of the most beautiful parts of being a human.
But I mean, we're like the only species that really has like the depth
Yeah.
of those things out there. And I think that's, like obviously like having conscious minds and
Yeah.
feelings are what separates us, from most of the other animals out there. And yeah, it's not easy. And but I will say this, that it feels really nice to hear some of my younger clients that I have speaking about the acceptance of just like all people, and like, being very open to however other people present themselves, like just being very accepting of that. And yeah, it's really really beautiful.
Yeah, there's a consciousness shift, and you don't, you can see it. It's more than obvious, and it's showing up with, our younger beings. Like, they are coming in and they are feeling things, and they're less susceptible to prejudice and to judgment in that way, and racism, and are really more connected to their emotions and to themselves in a very unique way. And I think it's stunningly beautiful. Um, and we're lucky to have these beings coming in with this type of heightened awareness.
Yeah, it really is beautiful. Yeah. And it just feels right. It feels right. It feels good. Yeah.
Just a gentle reminder that if you're doing the inner work or feeling called for deeper self-exploration and transformation, that my practice is here to support you. My role as a transcendental mindset coach is to serve as a compassionate guide and mirror, reflecting your inner brilliance and potential, because you came to this life with everything it is that you need to align with your path and purpose. In doing this, I offer a range of services tailored to meet the unique needs of each client, incorporating the support of evidence-based coaching techniques, meditation, mindfulness practices, Gene Keys shadow work, pattern recognition, somatic work, inner parts work, kinetic, and breath work to facilitate inner balance and alignment alongside being trauma informed. We will work in tandem as I support you in integrating or embodying your newfound awareness and heightened openness to a higher form of consciousness. It is my intention to support you as you architecturally design the reality you want to participate in and the life that you want to live. My practice supports you in being a masterful creator of intentions. You can contact me via my website. The link is in the show notes. So thank you, and please enjoy the remainder of the episode. Regarding awareness, so what we do recognize is that, men have never been given that open door to be aware of their emotions and what they're feeling. What else would you say pertaining to awareness do you see that is difficult for men in terms of deprogramming?
Well, that's a loaded question. I would, yeah. So to kind of blanket, I guess, a little bit more. Well, it's funny you bring this up. So with a lot of my clients recently, that we've been, I've been having them like slow down everything they're doing. So, one of the things, just as like an awareness creative tool, be like, if you're making dinner, no music, no TV in the background, no nothing. You're just cutting the vegetables. You're just putting it in there. You're just being here, and then noticing if your attention strays off of that, like bringing it back in. So just like, mindfulness exercises is kind of what I'm giving them. And, And it's often quite funny. I had like a group of men that were like 40s to 60s, and they were all coming to me right around the same time, being like, "I'm tired." And so I kind of developed this term of awareness fatigue, because they were getting so tired of being aware, that they're just like, this is coming up and that's coming up, and like, I've never seen this before. And so it was like this kind of like, oh, like I can access something different than what's been in there all the time. And so I do, give them some meditation and mindfulness activities they can do on a daily basis, or even just like a, quote unquote regular basis. But it's been really beautiful to watch all their transformations, just because like once they start to see a little bit, like it's funny just what like being aware of making dinner can do, across the span. And so like they'll notice like, oh, something's coming up right now, where they can be a little more conscious, less reactive and more responsive. And so, I'm thinking of one guy right now who, he would have a bad day at work and come home and just kind of like just be grumpy. And now he can come home and still be grumpy, but like just let his wife know, hey, I'm a little bit grumpy right now as I come in the house. I just want to let you know that. And then that gives her the ability to like give him some space, or, tell, like, doesn't like, excuse him from like behavior or anything, but it allows everyone in the room to adapt rather than just like
Mhm.
making assumptions of
Yeah.
like, well, what's happening or not. So I
Yeah.
don't know.
They can respect him where he's
Yeah,
at.
exactly. And that allows him to like, feel what he's feeling. He's able to like come out and be like, hey, this is what happened, rather than just feeling like, all right, had a bad day, gotta suck it up, like, and go home and like, like do this and this and this, and it'd be like so task oriented and less like, you know, qualitative, feeling oriented. And so, yeah, it's beautiful. So it's such beautiful stories to hear when like people are like, oh, like I feel that. And now I'm not only like feeling it inside, but I'm expressing it verbally to other people and allowing them to know. And now I'm not internalizing these things. And heck, I even feel like a little bit better because I'm not like, pushing it down. So
Yeah. Yeah. What I'm hearing is that you're supporting people in recognizing or eliminating the habits that they had constructed that was promoting numbing and disassociating from the self. And um, something that I recognize, or some habits that I recognize that people will take on as soon as they get home from work, or there's a stressful event that has occurred, is that, as soon as they get home, they turn on a TV, and the TV's on in the background the whole time, and or like a sports game, or there is music on the whole time, and it creates a distraction of like, okay, I have to make dinner, let's just muscle through it and get it done. And when we really look at some of the most beautiful practices and philosophies that come from the East in terms of mindfulness, there's one particular one that I just recently, I think it's a Zen Buddhism, where it's a I'm going to butcher it, but it's like a water bowl meditation. And they start at the temple, and it's quite a long walk to the bottom, a trail that goes down to the bottom of the temple to a riverbed or a river. And they have to carry a bowl that's full of water. And it's this slow paced movement of carrying this bowl and not spilling any water. And it means completely like just surrendering yourself to the moment and being in the moment, focused on this bowl of water, and clearing your mind, because the minute that your mind starts wandering and going a different place, like all of a sudden now you're spilling some of the water. And it's this practice of surrendering yourself to what it is that you're doing. So when you're making dinner and you've completely surrendered and you're offering devotion to just the act of making dinner, if we look at what devotion is, it's an act of love. So now you are coming from a state of love and being truly in the moment and being mindful of this interaction that you're having with the food that you're feeding to your body. And there's just so many wonderful things that come of that whole interaction. And so it sounds like you're also introducing some of the 101 concepts of meditation to these clients as well, in terms of mindfulness and full presence.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the first thing that comes to mind with like the devotion, especially related to food, is like, that's why, like, for many people, like moms, home cooking tastes the best because it's made with devotion, for a lot of people, and it's made with love, for a lot of folks. And so, yeah. So I think that's really wonderful. But and you speaking of like that Zen water bowl activity, uh, and I think it's it brings to mind just that men in general, I think, connect a little bit more to like an activity created to like mindfulness and awareness. And so I think that's why many are drawn to sport, because it does like pull them into this thing. But I think the issue comes is when we we become attached to a desired outcome. And if we don't achieve that outcome, then there's a sense of reactivity of, losing, or failure. Exactly. And so that's kind of the hang up, with a lot of that, but being able to, utilize these same like mindfulness techniques in something that's like not competitive, or even with some of my clients, it's like, I want to make the best dinner ever. And I'm like, hold on. All right, let's pump the brakes here. Let's just make dinner, however taste the taste, it doesn't have to be great or good. Sometimes you're going to make a good dinner, and like all dinners are good. Some's going to taste better. Some's going to not taste as good. And then, you utilize that lesson of like, okay, I can repeat this again or something similar next time I cook dinner, or I can make a shift here if I didn't enjoy the product, and, maybe, add a little more salt or a little less pepper, whatever it is. And so then that kind of like segues into, life in general, where it's like, oh, I made a mistake here, or this happened. And rather than it being the end of the world and ruining someone's day, or like an experience that they're having with their partner or whatever, where they're still like so in whatever mistake they made before, it's like growth, an opportunity for growth, where it's like, oh, okay, this happened. We want this to change. Let's like shift over this way a little bit. And I made a mistake, and that's okay. I'm a human being.
Yeah, I hear that you're really supporting that growth mindset
Mm-hmm.
rather
Yeah.
than a competitive mindset and the zero sum game that
Yeah,
we've been conditioned to.
totally. Yeah. And I mean, yeah. And, this very well, like, competition is just like, is plaguing, our culture and society in general. And, but in particularly with men, I think is like the competition thing, but like, with women too, like working your way up the corporate ladder, and, even sports and all that too. And, I think as long as competition is used, it can be used in like a healthy-ish way. Um, if we can remove attachment and outcome, and, again, be in that growth like journey mindset.
Yeah, something I tend to work on with my clients is the only person you should be competing with is who you were yesterday or last week. Because that's who you are competing with, is in terms of your growth. And, if you're competing with yourself, then you're not outsourcing, you're actually growing and expanding and evolving and pushing the edges of your own comfort in order to expand. But when we are looking outside of ourselves and comparing ourselves to others, which is what happens when we are in competition with others, and everyone is here for a very different path. And that is a big part of my work, with myself and with my clients, is unity consciousness and oneness, and really recognizing that I am you, and you came here to have a different experience. And through curiosity and even, empathic merging with you, is I can actually learn your experience that you're having. And it's almost like a life hack where I can live two lives in one. And that's something that I have been doing since I was a very young girl, is experiencing life through others, because you are here to have a different path. And when we're competing with others, and comparing, then we're not here to do what we came here to do, which is to have this unique experience. Instead, we're saying, well, I should have that person's experience. And why aren't I having that person's experience? That's not what you came here to do. And if you really lean in, learn yourself and own it, you'll have such a tremendous experience and a tremendous life of authenticity and like do what you came here to do.
Yeah, I love that. And actually, yeah, it sounds like the work you're doing with your clients is amazing.
It's so fun.
Yeah.
So fun.
I really like my job too. Yeah. Yeah, but one of my favorite meditation teachers is George Mumford. I'm not working with him directly, but I've read a lot of his books and, been supported through some of his YouTube things and different stuff on that in that realm. But he used to work with Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. He was their meditation coach. He's worked with, a lot of like NBA stars and yeah, he worked with all those championship Chicago Bulls teams in the 90s and the Lakers in the 2000s. And but anyway, that's his big thing is he's always like, you're only in competition with yourself. You're not facing like another team. You're just trying to be better and better version of you. And in fact, he said the Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant's like greatest scoring games was the game before. He told them, you got to stop trying so hard to like score and like dominate people. Just let the game come to you and do it. And then they score a billion points or whatever it is the next game. And so, yeah, so that was really wonderful. And I love what you said too about like the unity consciousness thing, because that's very Buddhist. They talk a lot about that. It's like, if you're working on you to be better now as a collective where everyone's just going to be better. And so to be able to support people the way you do sounds really amazing in that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. When we recognize, we look at what everyone in the world's doing and we see big players, right? People who are making impact and at like a large scale. And it's easy to look at yourself. I mean, I've done this numerous times and, I've had numerous unity consciousness experiences of, it's a mystical experience of like time literally stops and receiving downloads and information and light is everywhere and things are illuminated. It's just, and you're so filled with love that you're going to burst and I end up sobbing. And it's just this incredible experience. And even after having these experiences numerous times, I still get sucked into the comparison of the ego wants to compare, right? And so I see these people who are doing work at such a large scale in terms of supporting the collective and supporting society in areas that are marginalized. And I have to remind myself that the most powerful work that I can do is internally, because as I change my own vibration and I expand myself to the greater consciousness, and it allows me to be receptive and to be a larger state of consciousness, I'm doing work that supports the collective. And as I do that work internally, my cup then becomes full. I have a greater capacity to do work at a higher level to support the collective, but it starts internal. And if you really start moving outside of yourself to support those outside of you and you haven't done the inner work, that's where you become drained, burned out. It's where the work isn't honest because there's still a lot of your own ego that's being embedded in the work. And that's where issues come in, right? And things get muddied and then we're being called out publicly for some sort of unethical behavior, right? And so I really think it's incredibly important, like unity consciousness and oneness and recognizing how doing our own work supports the collective and the planet.
Yeah, I couldn't say it better at all. I think that, just to speak personally as a psychotherapist, sometimes while I'm seeing a client, they'll start speaking in a certain way and I'll start to feel some type of way, maybe resistance or, something to how they're speaking. And I think it's been vitally important for me to check in with myself. Like, hey, is this like, yeah, what's coming up for you right now is someone else is speaking, and making sure that like you know, I'm understanding my role in this person's life, because is this like, is this Trey's ego speaking right now internally and drawing this up, and wait a minute, let me slow down, because I'm here to support this person, not for, this person to, get at me, or whatever that, whatever that shapes or looks like in those moments. So yeah. And I have, to be transparent, I've totally given into that at times, where it's just like something comes up and I'm like, didn't support that person, later it's like, I didn't support that. And, some of that comes up in the next session we'll have, like, hey, I'm sorry. Like maybe I came across a little bit, this type, I just happened last week, actually, to be fully transparent, and we talked about it. And, we're able to like, it was actually a great opportunity for, someone else to see that, everyone here is human, and, we're all doing the work here. So.
I love your transparency around that and reflection on that. And I completely agree. Every session and every client that I have, personally, I feel like that person, I'm working with that person because I'm being called to reflect on a certain part of myself and to heal a certain aspect of myself that wouldn't surface if it weren't for that client. And so that client working on a particular issue raises my awareness of that issue within myself. So everyone I'm working with is a mirror. And so that heightens the potential of being triggered or becoming attached to, a certain belief system or your ego getting to show up. And, even in our type of relationships between coach and client, counselor, client, social worker and client, when you're working that intimately with people, you're just as susceptible to a rupture as you are in any relationship. And the ability to repair that rupture, I think, is where the work really is, right? And showing that person what it looks like to repair a rupture, because a lot of the clients that are coming to us are not people that have maybe had those opportunities based on the relationships in their lives or even known how to do it. And so also getting to see in real time what taking accountability looks like, what circling back looks like, what repair of a rupture looks like, and just owning our own shit, what that looks like.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. You talk about that mirror, and I feel the exact same way. It's like, okay, like you're talking to someone and I'm like, all right, yep. And the words that I'm speaking to you are also the words I'm speaking to me.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's, I often, tell people that I feel really lucky to do what I do, because not only is it working with other people, but it's very much like a reminder of all the work that I need to do on on myself.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Because it's never done.
Yeah.
It just gets easier, but it's never done.
But I like to, what was the metaphor that I use is like, it's like you're on the bus and the bus never stops. It's always going, there's a stop here and there, but it like, there's no end on it. I actually had a client that used to live in New York City, and we talked about the subway, and it's like, the subway takes a break here and there,
Yeah.
but every single day, different stop, people coming on, people getting off. It's busier sometimes. It's not as busy sometimes, but you're always like, it's always moving.
I'd like to kind of bring up something that we discussed last time, which is in alignment with, taking accountability on how we show up for others. And I'd like to relate that to the experience of men who are doing the work or aren't really showing up and doing the work. And I know there's a lot of backlash from women, especially online. Especially women who are doing the work, and you start to realize like the dating pool, the more you do the work, the dating pool gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And, there's some resentment and anger amongst women because, on these social platforms, because the beliefs are, well, if they did the work, I wouldn't be lonely. If they did the work, I wouldn't feel subjected to toxicity, sexual assault, manipulation tactics. when I meet men online on dating apps. And, you know, I'm very curious how men are feeling supported by the feminine in doing the work, and kind of what the dialogue is on that end, on that side of things.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of it is kind of a tricky one here because it really depends on the man who's doing the work and also the woman who's supporting or not supporting the work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and sometimes I see it very situational as well, where like it's okay for you to now be raw and vulnerable in this situation, but then sometimes not feeling supported if they're feeling raw and vulnerable and more emotional in this situation, where it's kind of like this dichotomy. And so it can be a little confusing for some of these guys that are getting more in touch and in tapped, and in particular, I'm just thinking of a couple of clients right now that, are married, and, they've been, doing this, they've been getting more in touch, and it's something they've been asked to do by their partner. And then like now they're like having this big shift. And then sometimes the partner's like, now I don't know what to do because like, this isn't the person I'm used to. So I know for just for a lot of people when we've been in a situation with the same people, whether that's parents or spouse or siblings or even like long-term friends, a lot of times those people know you for this person you've always been, and their actions and words and behaviors towards you try to keep you in that space even when you're growing and doing
Yeah.
these different things. And so so a lot of times there's a like, I don't know what the word is, but there's this like questioning by the people that I'm supporting as to like, what do I do? Like I'm changing, but like these people, like sometimes they don't recognize that, like, the people or their environments are like the same, and they're trying to be warped back into the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I like to often remind them that's like, while you're changing, you don't give them a chance to adapt unless you continue to be the person that you're becoming.
Mm-hmm.
And so to keep them in the patterns, like people will adapt to who you're becoming if you like stay your course. And it's very hard and it's very challenging. And, sometimes it does mean taking space from people we're close to in order for you to get that get that new foundation stabilized within you. But yeah, I think that's really, it's really important. And it's also back to that assertive nature that we were talking about before, where the masculine kind of comes in that way, where it's like, I'm making change. I got to stick to this, to find that, assertive voice or that assertive presence within me, even if it's scary. And so as far as like, the the man making the raw and vulnerable changes, I think it's very like situational, in regards to their spouse or their partner. But there definitely are times that I've heard where it's just like, I don't know what to do with this anymore. Like, this is like so new, from a partner of a person that's making changes like that. Like, I don't know if I like this now. You've made all these changes and shifts, and I'm not sure about this. Yeah, which sometimes is, slightly heartbreaking, but also too, it's like really beautiful that the person is like truly, delving into that rawness.
Yeah, I think I remember during one of our conversations, you had mentioned like a man started adopting some of the changes that his partner was requesting of him and becoming more vulnerable and in touch with his emotions. And then she was like, whoa, okay, wait a minute. I said be vulnerable, but like not that vulnerable. And like, can we put a cap on this? And when I heard that, of course, it was expressed with a little bit of humor, but I'm also like thinking from his perspective, like I tried to see it from his perspective and her perspective, and then the perspective of the coach or the healer. And I just thought like how beautiful for him, they let basically turn the water spigot on and it just poured. This man has all of this that's been pent up, not just in his lifetime, but like generational, right? We look at the lineage of pent up emotions that hasn't been released. And, there's been studies and research that has revealed that, generational trauma is stored in our bodies up to 7 generations back. And the psychologist that did this research said that she even believed it goes back even further. I think she said 27 generations, but they could prove up to 7. And 7 generations is just of a lot of like pent up emotions that hadn't been released. And I think, well, that's incredibly beautiful for this man to be able to release them. And then, I try to think of it, see it from the woman's perspective of, also, we've been trained and programmed for so long to see men in a certain way. And as this man is evolving and changing, and allowing these emotions to move, his vibration is also changing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And also the way he expresses himself and the way that we express ourselves and feel our emotions even changes the way that our facial features look and the way we hold our bodies, our demeanor. So, for this woman, this could be losing her husband and getting to fall in love with a new person, or losing her husband and falling out of love with this new person.
Yeah.
And she's the catalyst behind the change. So it's like, if you're going to be the catalyst behind this and ask a man to do the work, it should also be with the recognition that there's a possibility that this person might change so much that you may fall out of love with them.
Yeah. It's scary.
And then that has to be okay.
Yeah, it's scary. It's very scary. I mean, like you speak those words and like, hearing you say that, I'm like, yeah, that's scary, and I hear these people speak of that where they're just like, this is scary for me to like talk about how I feel or, or even like feel how I feel. Yeah, it's like new and weird and I don't like it right now. And, yeah, all those things. And you're 100% right. Yeah. As people change, they change and they're not the same.
No. And that energy can't be contained and controlled to keep them representing the old version that you fell in love with.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that you brought up the, kind of the energetic concept of allowing a person the space to transform. Because with any type of inner work that we do, we transform. But when you are surrounded by a group of people who don't want to see you a different way, then they're not giving you the freedom to transform. And if they're not accepting you in your new state and they have resistance, energetically, it's a play against your evolution, which is why you see a lot of kids at 18 want to go to a college in a different state because they want the freedom of letting go of the weird nickname that their high school and middle school peers gave them, or the time they pissed their pants in grade school and none of their peers forgot about it, right? So like we see ourselves through mirror neurons, how those around us see us. And if you want an opportunity to really get to see yourself different, then sometimes it means letting go of those around you who, can't be flexible and allow you to alter or to transform.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if I have anything to add to that, Ilani. That was great. I love that.
I'm doing a lot of thinking on that one because I'm writing an article for Brains magazine on that particular topic. So I was really excited when you brought it up. I was like, oh, how lovely.
Yeah, it's well, in one of the psychiatrists that I read most, I've read nearly all of his books, is Dr. Dan Siegel. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him.
Who is that?
Well,
Who would that be?
yeah. Well, I adore him in a lot of different ways. But we talk about adaptability. You're talking about adaptability and flexibility, and so was I. And so that's how he defines mental health, right? Is like
Yes.
the ability to
Yes.
be adaptable and flexible, and
Yeah.
not to be cliche Bruce Lee, but, he used to say, be like water. And so, Dan Siegel has that. He has this analogy of like, on the two banks of the river, rigidity and chaos. And so that's what causes most of the suffering that we have in our lives. If we're too rigid about something or we're too chaotic. And then in the middle, we have water. And water's adaptability and flexibility. If there's a rock, it goes around it or moves over it. It always just kind of takes shape, takes form to whatever it is. And if we are suffering, we can look on either side of the banks and see kind of where we are, and then kind of, ask ourselves that question, like, how can I be a little more adaptable? How can I be a little more flexible in this situation? And when it comes also, I think it's particularly important for not just like the people that we see as clients, but also the supporters of those clients to make sure that they're being adaptable and flexible.
Yeah.
Because then that really allows for transformation and change.
Yeah. Otherwise, they keep getting pulled into the same dynamic over and over and over. And, if they're not being given the room to be flexible, then that new self can't emerge because they're in this same dynamic over and over again, which, is very similar. As I mentioned, I'm here helping my mother do some stuff, and I catch myself falling into an old dynamic when I was about the age of 16 or 17, because there's a lack of change on the side of my family. There hasn't been much metamorphosis. And so now I'm entering back into like a time warp, and I'm seeing the dynamic play out, and I'm like, whoa, but that's not even who I am anymore. Like, like I've done so much work. Like,
yes.
What the fuck is happening here? And I'm just like, shit. Like, then you really have to be like you said, steadfast and really focused on maintaining that growth and that, new version of self, so that you're not getting pulled into those old dynamics with other people that want to keep you caught in that old version of self.
Yeah. Yeah. The loop. Yeah. Yeah. And like me too, when you're back in those environments that always like, it's just like everybody wants to return right back to that space. And, you have to like pump the brakes, be like, let me take a breath. Like, okay, like that was me. That is not me, and like kind of almost like relearn again. I mean, change is really fucking hard. It's really hard. Like really hard. And, and then like to have people that are struggling to accept those changes makes it even harder,
Yes.
So like, anybody listening, if you're supporting a person that's making changes, like really understand your purpose and, your role in that, from the adaptability and flexibility standpoint, like really try your best to just understand this whole new dynamic that's taking place, and like continue to ask the person how they need to be supported in those ways.
Yeah, because that's what love is. Love is, how can I support you in your transition? Not, I believe you should become this person or morph this way or change these things, but not change these things. Like, that's control. And that is the toxicity that we let go of when we're doing the inner work. And if you have a partner that you have been a proponent of them doing the inner work and changing, you should be right there with them. And I hate to use shoulds, but if you're not doing the work alongside of them, then you become an anchor of the old energetic dynamic rather than growing and moving with them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can even speak as a therapist personally that like I've struggled with that at times too. Even being a conduit of change and like helping that out, and then in your personal life, like, not maybe recognizing those things, and then having to check in with yourself, and it's like, wait a minute, I gotta, like, they're working, I gotta work. I don't know what my work is. Maybe my work is part of their work, but my work is definitely my own work. And what, how are we shifting and, making these different lives, joined in in a particular
Mhm.
way. And
Mhm.
that comes, like you said, like, it just gave me chills when you're like, you love, yeah, like that's true love is like when
Mhm.
you like love a person enough to support them in any way that they need in order for them to like make change. And love can shift too, I mean,
Mhm.
like you're talking, it's like you were talking before and, maybe you fall out of love, like this specific love with this person, but like you allow a whole new different type of love to kind of shine and grow.
Yeah.
And I really do think that's what makes long-term like relationships and marriages work is just like the ability to continuously love the changes that are happening and being able to support your partner and yourself, through the dynamics. And again, I was talking about the core, like when you pull away the layers, like helping support that person, like get into the core of their being and their authenticity and their truth.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I love that. Love is very much this thing that changes and evolves. It's an energy, right? It's a movement. Love can transcend dynamics as well, right? When we allow a person to grow and evolve. I had a partner in when I was about 24, and we were in very much a romantic relationship. And that began to change. How I loved him began to change. And we both entered into more of a brother sister dynamic of just having this really beautiful love and connection and compatibility with one another. But chemistry wasn't there anymore. But both of us were growing and evolving and changing. And he could have been with me and I could have been with him, very rigid and saying, well, no, you're changing. I don't even recognize who you are anymore. But we weren't. We were both very flexible with one another and giving each other the space to change. And the relationship I had with him in that new brother sister dynamic, that new dynamic was far more fruitful and far more expansive than the romantic relationship. And he ended up separated for about 8 months and then came back as roommates and spent a couple years living together in New York. And he had trouble dating women. And because when women found out that he lived with a former partner, they would become very insecure with that. And he met one woman who had no issues with it. And he was, very excited about this woman. And she came to meet me and I fell in love with her. And so here, not only did he finally meet the right woman that he ended up marrying, but I got a sister. And then I started spending more time with her than I would with him, and like, we'd go to the farmer's market and I'm like, no, you can't go. I'm going with her. I'm going with Carly, like my time with Carly. And so I had this sister. And then when he did move out, they moved around the corner and I had family, and then they ended up getting married and having a child. And, and so this is what it looks like to allow love to transcend dynamics and not be rigid and controlling. Because again, as Dan Siegel says, that rigidity is our suffering.
Yeah. Well, I'm so thankful you shared that story, just to get that out there because I think it's like such a beautiful dynamic that isn't shared enough. We're all leaned into this like you break up and that's it, and that's like the end of it. But if we truly allow love to take place, and like you said, it just shifted for y'all, and like now you love him, but as a brother, and that's like, so amazing and so great. And, but yeah, I just hope that everyone can find that in past partners and there's like less resentment and, less of all that and more of just this adaptability and flexibility of allowing people to just truly blossom and take shape into, their true form.
I love this. What a great dialogue around flexibility and growth and expansion and supporting people in doing the inner work and not being the anchor that keeps them from their own evolution and transcending. Such a great conversation around this topic. I'm wondering from your perspective, if you're hearing anything more from men from the perspective of your male clients that would help women in understanding how we can better support men in getting to the point of feeling like they can do the inner work or while they're in the transitions that are occurring while doing the inner work. Like as the feminine, how can we support men who are leaning more into their femininity and leaning more into their emotions and into deprogramming generations and generations of toxicity.
Yeah. It's great you asked this question. Well, you asked this question because, like, what we just talked about, I think is important. But I think something that is like almost like dire in this is to like just ask your partner how they're doing, and truly ask, like, and truly do a check-in. Especially if something's up, and maybe if they're involved with a good therapist or, a good coach or what will, they're most likely starting to tap a little bit more into that feeling side. But it's so new for a lot of us that we need to be asked. And then, and for the men out there listening, like being honest in that situation when someone says, "How are you doing?" It's nearly all my clients, I do this, I say, "How are you doing?" "Fine." And I'm like, no, 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 no. Like, I want you to take a moment right now, close your eyes and like really scan your body and ask, "How are you doing?" It doesn't have to be this instantaneous fine or good. Like, and sometimes, after you take a moment, it is just fine or good, but like, truly doing that. And it's something I try to model in my sessions with clients too, where they're like, "Hey, how you doing?" And I'll take a moment and, maybe I say, "This session's about you, but I just want to let you know that, yeah, I am having a tough day today. And, we'll just stop it there. But thank you for asking me," because I'm trying to model that and let them know that it's not about me, it's about them. Or, say, "Well, I'm having a great day, whatever, sun's shining, got a good run in, whatever came up for me." But I do think really checking in and not letting your man off the hook with just a good or a fine, asking them, and I mean, hopefully some couples will like just listen to this together, or maybe separately, and be able to say, "Okay, I need to ask my man how you're doing," and the man needs to be like, How am I really doing?" And be able to like have that dialogue in truth, to be like, "Oh, you know what? Like, I feel a little pit in my stomach right now." And like, have your partner, your partner's not your therapist, but like, like you can help them explore it a little bit, be like, "Okay, there's something off, like, what's going on here?" And it doesn't have to be like this long conversation, but I think just helping, like, we're not good at checking in on ourselves, in general. Men are not good at checking in on ourselves. We put our heads down, we do what we got to do, and then we go to bed, and so for someone to ask that question, I think is really important, because I do think society and culture has kind of shifted out of that, like, "Oh, we just are fine or okay," or we don't even check in on our men because, like, they're always just fine or okay or good. So I just stopped asking after a while, but like having that conversation and having the radical honesty as a man to like truly check in with what's going on.
Yeah, I think that's a super valid point. And what I can say coming from, the female perspective on that is that, many of us who have been participating in the old paradigm, the old belief system, have come from the stance that the man is the pillar of strength, that the man is very logical, and like, because they're logical and very rational, that their emotions are just inherently in check, that they somehow have mastered those two. And it's actually quite the opposite. They might have rationality and logic down, but it's because they're leaning so much into that the emotions is the chaos. And for women, we're mastering the emotions and how we're moving through it and making sense of it and releasing it. And then, for some of us, not all of us, rationale and logic, we might be approaching it in the same way that we approach moving through emotions. And so there's this belief system that if a man doesn't ask for it, he doesn't need it. And then maybe when we do try to check in with him, there's this insecurity of being vulnerable because it doesn't want to be perceived as weak. So then, no, I'm good. I'm good. Well, will you tell me if something is wrong? Yeah, I would tell you if something is wrong. Again, there's the dishonesty, right? Because it's dishonest with the self. And I think for women, if we're inviting men into this arena that we have been in and perfecting and mastering and moving through for centuries. If we're going to invite men into this arena so that they can be better partners for us, so that we can have these healthier relationships, I think that we have to demonstrate awareness at a higher level. We're used to participating in self-awareness, but I believe that we need to lean into awareness of what he might be going through, how he might be perceiving his experience, especially based on limited understanding of his emotions, and might have to reinforce or might have to check in more than we're used to doing. And we're not his therapist, but we are a support system. And what I know about support systems is that sometimes we are guiding. Sometimes we are offering ourselves as, a pillar of strength for the other person. We are an ear and not a problem solver, right? And I think it's really important for women to recognize that, we're inviting someone into an arena that we're quite comfortable in, and checking in with him would really be a great support. So I think that's a super valid and valuable comment.
Yeah. And, and sometimes, like, if your man's open enough for it, asking some questions. Does it feel like this? What's this going on? You can add a couple little extra things in there that maybe, because women are have been experts on this for a really long time. Actually, I was speaking with my partner this morning before I got on the call, and she's also a psychotherapist and ceremonialist.
Oh.
And she was saying, I think men have way more feelings than what women do. And then we kind of got into just a slight dialogue about that. I'm like, yeah, you know what? Like we're coming into feeling the feelings a little bit more, like in this kind of era of the thing. But I was like, I don't think you're wrong. Like, I think both parties, probably have equal amounts of feelings, there. I think, men are just starting to kind of come into this ability to get into that space a little bit more, and it's a little more loud for us at the moment. But just being able to get the support from the experts on that, I think is great. And even having some subtle dialogues with each other about just hey, how can I support you more? Are you open to this? What's coming up for you right now? But yeah, we need, y'all gonna have to get your crowbar out a little bit and
some crying.
Cry in a little bit more,
Loving crying.
The loving crying, yeah, but also kind of reading body language and tone of voice and everything. Because if there's some resistance, it could be just that he's not ready for that at that moment, or maybe he's being honest. Maybe there isn't something coming up, and so it's it's a dance for sure. And if you love your partner and you both love each other, just having talks and dialogues around this and being more open to one another, I think will just open this door and just really cultivate a really beautiful romance.
Something that came up for me when you were saying that your partner thinks that men have way more feelings. Something came up for me. There's this video that was circling the internet not too long ago of these they look like preschoolers, and it was two girls and a boy, and the girl was telling the boy that he was going to do something, or there's something accusatory in a way, and she poked his chest, and he goes, "Ow, you hurt my heart." And he's feeling these emotions that are so big, and you can tell he's just so vulnerable and open. And then they're the girl's "Oh God, what did I do?" And he's "No," he's just feeling so raw and open. And I think the comment was see, boys do feel, or men are naturally highly emotional. And I thought that was so beautiful, and that just came up for me. But if you ever cross it on the internet, it is so cute.
Oh, it sounds adorable right now, and props to that guy who ever put that video up.
Why did you hurt my heart, man?
Amazing.
So, out of curiosity, how important do you think men's groups and men's circles are for men who are doing the inner work?
That's a really interesting question. And I say that because about a year ago, maybe a little less than a year ago, I was running a men's group and I stopped because people stopped. People just didn't show up.
What?
Yes. So, and I'll take, partial responsibility that I probably could have marketed it a little bit better. but I do have quite a bit of pull from different areas of the US. And I was actually kind of shocked that that happened. And so I asked a couple friends of mine, like, how come you didn't come? You
Mhm.
know, and they were like, I was scared. Yeah.
Mm.
They're like, we didn't know what we were getting ourselves into, basically like, I don't know these other people. I'm not sure, I'm ready to go there emotionally. It definitely fed the stigma that's been created for, centuries, around that, where it's like, do I really and truly want to open myself up to another man?
Mm.
And I can speak as a man who is quite emotional, that it is often much easier to speak with a woman
Mhm.
about how I'm feeling than it is a guy. And I've had to learn over the course of time that, like, okay, who are my safe people? It's like, I know
Mhm.
my brother, my brother's a very safe person. He's awesome. He leans a little heavier on the masculine side too. So he's like, very much, yeah, he's my homie and a great sounding board for me. And then I got a handful of other friends that I know I can call now,
Mhm.
um, that I can call and lean into that didn't always feel like the case for me, to be
Mhm.
quite honest. Like I was like, I don't know who I can talk to about this hurt that I'm, feeling right now.
Mm.
And this is also coming from a person who grew up in both my parents were therapists too.
Mm.
Yeah. So, we didn't have a ton of dialogue around feelings, to be quite honest with you. Like as I grew up, they were more part of the like, 90s era, like therapy systems, but they also did, a lot of energy, and they would notice if I was feeling some type of way and ask the questions, around that.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay, and, we definitely had a lot of love and a lot of that, but, a lot of those things that happened in the home. Yeah. Being on sports teams my whole life, and, the kind of like the bravado and everything that went along with that.
Mhm.
A lot of times didn't feel as safe for me to talk to people as well, talk to other men as well about just what's coming up for me, what was coming up for me emotionally.
Mhm.
So I think men's groups are great, and I think they're very important because I think it opens the door for, all of us to be open to everyone, not just women or not just the therapist or,
Mhm.
whoever it is. It kind of opens the door for more men to speak
Mhm.
freely about what's coming up, and which is why I'm kind of, looking to do more retreats and, on the brink of doing like a men's meditation group that I'm going to run online really soon. And and I thought that might be even a better way to like start like creating more of a men's sangha
Yeah.
related to that, because we can be mindful and have this practice and this like activity to kind of draw you in towards the healing and towards the
Mhm.
feelings as a way to to just get a little deeper and more in touch. But yeah, I think that men's groups are
Mhm.
pretty ideal.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. What I tend to recognize is safety also comes with, in a way, consciousness, right? So if I meet someone who is, right off the bat, I don't really know them, but I'm recognizing that they are leaning into a higher state of consciousness, and they're exhibiting it through self-awareness and awareness of others around them, awareness of their environment. I tend to feel safer in their presence. Because if they're illustrating self-awareness, then I think that there's a higher probability that they are going to have more control over lower vibrational emotions. And something that I had heard from a friend of mine who belongs to a large men's group is that the people who are there who are not leaning into a higher state of consciousness, who are really lacking the ability to be aware of self and others, not even just their emotions, just to be aware, because they're really checked out. They're disassociating, they're numbing through substances that they instantaneously don't feel safe around those individuals because you don't trust that they know themselves well enough to know when they've become triggered, and that they're still operating from a higher sense of ego, and that ego wants to identify anything outside of them as the problem rather than recognizing that that person's a trigger to a deeper emotion that existed or unhealed trauma that existed way before this particular trigger occurred. And so then when someone is that unaware, then that's when they outlash, right? Or, anger or aggressiveness is used. And that can disrupt the safety of that circle quickly. Not to say that that was what was happening in your world, but from that person's perspective, he no longer is in that group and found another group where the requirement to be in the group was everyone had to be with a coach or a therapist doing the inner work. Like you had to have the support of a professional. That was the requirement to be in it.
Wow.
Yeah. Which
Yeah.
was safer.
I would say that probably is quite safer to, have a requirement like that. It saddens me for that man too, that was in the group the people that were in the group that, were just kind of like externalizing everything and weren't able to like create the consciousness. And it makes me want to like call them and be like, what's up? And, what can we,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
And also interesting to want to be in a group like that.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
But also like, I'm sure that, you've like really piqued my curiosity with this,
Yeah.
like wanting to be in the group. So you're obviously like there because you know that you want some change to take place. You want to feel supported in that group setting, but maybe not ready to fully like dive into the whole thing.
I've seen it in female groups that are primarily online, but it'll be women who join these groups who have just went through like a toxic relationship or some sort of relationship issue. And they want to have others that they can, tell their story to, vent to. But then when it's time to turn inward and look at the self, what is the pattern that you're repeating? Are you coming from a victim mentality mindset or lack? Like, what is happening that you are ending up in these relationships? Then all of a sudden, it's like aggressiveness, anger. And then, they'll start using terminology that they've seen online. You're gaslighting me. This is, and they'll have like a whole slew of language that they don't even know. Like they've just heard online. And so then it kind of collapses the integrity of the circle. So there is a vetting process, I believe, to some degree for having a healthy circle. But I don't know, with men, it's probably a different world. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And well, yeah, it is totally a different world, but I'm assuming this is probably the same issues, where, it does have to do with safety. Yeah. And I'm thinking of being back on some of the groups that I did run last year and like, kind of similar dynamics potentially where like there's more, specific people opening up a little bit more than everyone else and not coming back maybe because they felt so like open and that like, then they just left, and it was like, oh my God, I just like put my heart on the table and like no one else did. And, like maybe felt supported via me, but maybe not the other members of the group. And so.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I really hope that you start that up again and that you find your groove and your flow, because I believe that it's something that's tremendously needed, not just for men, but for women as well. And I think that what we really need are circles that have our elders. For the women, the mother, maid, and the crone, right? Which encapsulate the journey of the feminine and, in terms of age and wisdom and lessons. And to be able to have wise elder women who are not participating in programming and toxicity, who really have a clear mind and are coming from a beautiful, authentic place to hold space for the mother and the maid to grow and expand in and to move towards the wisdom of the crone, I think is incredibly important for women. And, what I recognize is it is incredibly important for men, especially with so many men that come from broken homes where fathers have abandoned and left and not showed up with integrity. And maybe they're present, but they're not paying child support and helping and, ensuring that they have better opportunities. And, these broken homes and systems where mothers are playing the masculine and the feminine role, they're doing their best, but it's no substitute for having the masculinity of a father to guide and to help support moving into manhood and whatever that threshold is, that where a boy recognizes, I am a man now.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I'm just thinking too, like in sometimes that I've been placed in that role as supporting adolescents as like, the therapist and, the first man that they've had that's been regularly consistent in their lives too.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I think these groups and just like figuring these dynamics out. And I also will say that I think many women are doing a really great job of like fully supporting their sons as they grow up, even if it is individually. And, it's really beautiful what women have been doing as far as like parenting and especially like single parenting out there. I think that's great. And also all the guys out there that have been single parenting too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a couple buddies that are doing that themselves, and it's really beautiful to like just watch them fall into those roles of like parenting a girl, as she's growing up and learning how to do hair and, doing all that stuff. So it's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been privy to, being in this new space, in this new state. I've been privy to how many men I've been seeing with their children, and not alongside the mother, like them and their toddlers grocery shopping or just walking. And I'm seeing much more of it here than I had seen in previous states. And I think it's incredibly beautiful. And I definitely see it. I recognize it. And I get like, I get butterflies in my belly because I'm just like, how beautiful. And I see these moments between the men and their children. And I'm like, that child's going to remember that. Like that's a little pinpoint in that child's memory of like when daddy picked him up and put him on his shoulders and then threw an apple up and the kid caught the apple. I'm like, that's ingrained, and not only in that kid's life, but that moves forward into children's lives. Like that's an energy that moves forward. And I think it's incredibly beautiful.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And it's spreading into culture and society. And yeah, it's just like, it's great to see. And I think that is part of this like shift for men with that emotional side is they're just like showing up so much more now for kids, family, friends, different things like that. So it was really beautiful to see.
So aside from the group work that you do one-on-one work, right? What else do you have going on in terms of services and offerings to the people viewing in case they want to get in touch with you?
Sure. So predominantly I've been doing like one-on-one individual work for, I guess, over a dozen years now, which is cool to say. And so I've been kind of moving a little bit more. Well, I should stop for a moment. So along with like psychotherapy work, you mentioned before, I do holistic health coaching and also I'm a certified personal trainer too. So sometimes I'm able to kind of integrate some of the body-esque stuff, what people are eating, because, most people know at this point, like what we consume in, whether that's digitally and technologically, or also like the food that we eat, and the relationships we have and all those things. But do some food education work with people on, healthy choices that they can make as far as that and stuff that might support their brains a little bit better. And also, I rate training and fitness programming for some of the clients that I see as well. And so, as you were mentioning before, I've kind of been, so I just bought a home in Southern Colorado. And one of the things that my partner and I are working on is making it to like a little retreat-esque facility where we can host people here and do some work with them here. So I'm actually in September going to be running my first like one-on-one retreat with and we're going to be rolling up, doing a little adventure therapy. We're going to be going into the mountains. It's like 20-minute drive away, doing some hiking and backpacking, and also using like solitude, silence, and meditation, because I do live in a really quiet area of the United States, to kind of cultivate a full experience for transformation, so the person can get a little more in touch with them, get out of like the regular hustle bustle of life, and also get into the wilderness and some like kind of uncomfortable situations potentially. And so, we're utilizing a lot of like discomfort and getting outside of, the norm in order to just feel a little bit more, see what's coming up for them. And then, rolling before they roll back into their regular life, doing some processing and seeing how that was. Silent retreat. I've been on a couple silent retreats at this point in my life, and it's been very magical and transformative for me to kind of just like be meditating for 8 to 10 hours a day, not straight, but like over the course of a day, via like just seated practice or also walking meditation. And then, and just seeing kind of what comes up for me. And so I just love that. And also as a mindfulness meditation teacher, being able to utilize kind of that seated silent practice for a couple of days to kind of see what's coming up for every individual that comes out to do that. So yeah, I'm pretty excited to kind of move into this like new venture while still supporting my own practice.
I absolutely love that. I love that. So it's like you get to go on an outdoor adventure, into doing the inner work, mindfulness practices, integration, while being in like solitude in nature and being supported by a professional who's with you the whole way. That's incredible. That's such a beautiful retreat concept. I love that. I think that's an amazing idea.
Thank you. Yeah, it actually just came to me within the past couple months, and so it's something I'm trying to support. And not to mention, we have like quite a few hot springs in the area here, so soaking in the hot springs is going to be part of the activities as well. So yeah, I really do think this is a really good. I did my thesis actually on adventure wilderness therapy when I was graduating with my master's in social work like a million years ago, and I got into that field for a year. I lived in Alaska and worked for this program in Alaska. And so it was really cool. And also I wasn't like fully involved as a therapist, like out in the field doing the work consistently. So I pulled back out of that. And it's something that I just feel really called back into. If I'm being honest, what I want to give to other people is what I do for myself. Whenever I feel like I need a recalibration, I, do silent retreat. I have a camper van. I like drive out and just get out of town for a little while and go rock climbing or surfing or, just like kind of in solitude in the desert or wherever it be. And so, so I know how healing that is for me. So I just want to be able to support other people and being able to, do something that I feel is really dear to me.
I think that's absolutely wonderful. And I can definitely see it excelling and progressing. And, if there's any men that I'm working with who I think would benefit from this and, express an interest in something like this, I will definitely send them your way.
Please do. That'd be lovely. And I'm really, really excited about this. I think it's going to just be really beautiful. Yeah.
So we've covered quite a bit today, but I really feel like I could probably do another 3 hours with you because there's so many other areas that I would love to delve into. And there's such a great, rapport going back and forth. And I really enjoy how your mind works and your experiences and your belief systems and your values. And I'm just really appreciate this time with you and appreciate the work that you're doing for others. And I'm curious if there's anything that you feel called to explore, or if there's something that you feel like you'd like to unpack a little bit more or elaborate on. What's coming up?
The thing, I guess, that just like strikes me is going back to what we were talking about before, that like change is really hard, but it's so worth it. And anybody out there that's like, I feel like I need some support in some way, shape, or everyone needs support, like out there, right? And the more we can utilize professionals and like know that fear is actually a compass to show us where we need to go. I mean, aside from like actual life-threatening fear, we should stay away from that. But like, as far as like emotional fear, that's actually a compass from where we need to go. And avoiding that just kind of like, again, puts us back in the loop of, the same old that's been just, plaguing us for suffering for our entire lives, and understanding that the process isn't easy. And what is, one of my favorite authors and meditation teachers is Chögyam Trungpa Rinpoche. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He started the Naropa University in Boulder back in like the 60s or 70s. But he has this quote, and I might butcher it, but it's something similar to, if you haven't started the journey, it's probably easier not to begin. But if you started, it's best to finish. And so just knowing that once you get into this stuff, it's change. You're going to consistently be changing the rest of your life if you allow the support to go there, and that it does get easier once you've like started to create change and feel into the discomfort. It doesn't it's not easy, but it gets easier.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's something that I say to my clients in the beginning of their work is, right now, this feels so scary. And it just continues as you work through one trigger and find that trauma and work through it and find the emotional resolve and disrupt the pattern. Then another one will surface, and then another one will surface, and another one will surface. And there's no getting around that. But as you work through them, you create the resilience within yourself and recognizing that you have the tenacity to work through these challenges. And with each one, it's the competence confidence loop, right? So you work through some of the low hanging fruit. And as you move deeper, it gets larger, but you have the confidence that you know that the power is within you to resolve. But I highly agree with you that we're in an age where professionals are all around us, right? There's so many people at our disposal that can support us on our journey. And so many spiritual belief systems and philosophies that are just emerging, that have kind of been dormant. And it's all coming to the surface now, I think, in this time, because this is a time of transformation and healing for the planet. And if you're watching this and you've made it all the way through to this point, clearly you're either on the path or intrigued with the path. But either way, there's a resonance, you're in alignment, and you're right where you're supposed to be.
Yeah, I love that. And I also would add, because there are so many like healers and therapists and counselors out there, that make sure you're treating it kind of like dating. Not every person that's out there is going to be for you. And experiment, feel into a couple different people, and go with what really feels is going to challenge you and support you in the way that you feel like you need to be supported.
I like that. Challenge you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Trey, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to spend this time with you and get to know you and kind of get your voice out there and all your knowledge and wisdom. And I, again, absolutely love these outdoor therapy retreat sessions retreats that you're creating. And I can really see this taking off. I think it's an incredible opportunity. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing, and helping the collective, as well as the inner work that you're doing for yourself. It's a tremendous contribution, and it was a tremendous pleasure to spend this time with you.
Great, thank you, and it's really been awesome. I really appreciate everything you're doing too, Lelania, and I hope we can do this again sometime. It was really fun.
Heck yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.